Hi everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why you let out a good cry sometimes, whether it's from happiness or sadness? Well, this new study might have a clue about the deeper reasons behind those tears. So, what exactly is emotional crying? It's more than just your eyes getting wet from cutting onions or dust. It's a whole package of responses, including tears, changes in your facial muscles, and sometimes even vocal sounds like sobbing or wailing. And it happens to all of us, from tiny babies to grown-ups. But scientists have found it pretty puzzling. Why do we do it? What's the point? They tried figuring out when, why, and how we cry for emotional reasons. There have been lots of ideas. Some thought of it like a safety valve releasing pent-up emotions, others as a signal of high stress or helplessness. Some theories focused on how our bodies react, while others looked at how we think about things. But these theories sometimes clashed or didn't explain all the evidence. That is where Janis Zickfeld and David Grüning came in. They wanted to bring all these ideas together into one big, coherent picture. They created a new framework called the Control-Arousal Signal Model, or CASE model. It tries to explain why we cry by looking at a combination of things happening in our bodies and minds. The core idea of the CASE model is that crying happens when two main things combine: a sudden surge in our body's arousal, meaning we get worked up, and a feeling that we're losing control of a situation. Think about it when you're overwhelmed by something good or bad, and you feel like you can't handle it. That's when tears might start to flow. The researchers explain this process in 5 stages. It starts with us encountering a situation. Then we appraise it, basically how we interpret it. If that appraisal leads to that feeling of losing control and a spike in arousal, we might then start crying. The model suggests the main job of crying is to signal this loss of control to others. It's like an SOS to get help or connect. A secondary job could be to help us regulate our own emotions. But that's more of a side effect. They looked at tons of existing research, trying to see how different theories fit together. For example, studies have shown that when people cry, their bodies often show signs of increased arousal, like your heart rate picking up. And as for control, many situations that make us cry involve feeling helpless, overwhelmed, or frustrated. Think about losing someone you love, or even a really intense, happy moment that just takes your breath away. That feeling of not being in charge is key. Now, what about the function of crying? Many people think crying helps us feel better, like a release. And there is some evidence that after crying, our bodies might calm down a bit. But the CAS model really leans into the idea that crying's main role is social signaling. It's about sending a message to others that you're struggling, that you need something. This is especially true for babies, who can't talk but can cry to signal they need attention from their parents. And even as adults, when we cry, people tend to react more positively and offer more help. It's like our tears are a clear sign that we're vulnerable and could use some support. So, how does this KS model of crying work in detail? Let's break down the key parts. First, the model sees emotion as a process with different parts: how we think about something, our appraisal, how we feel, the emotion itself, what we want to do, motivation, what happens in our body, physical response, how we manage our emotions, regulation, and how we show them, expression. Emotional crying fits into that last part, expression. The model shows how a stimulus like seeing a beautiful sunset or hearing sad news gets processed. This appraisal can lead to that crucial combination: a perceived loss of control and a sudden increase in arousal. Imagine a situation that triggers a loss of control and a sudden increase in arousal. If these two things happen together, it's like a green light for crying to start. If it is just high arousal, like when you're really angry and in control, you might not cry. If it is just feeling a little down but not overwhelmed, you might not cry either. It is that specific combo. The important thing about loss of control is that it's what we feel. Sometimes, even if things are objectively fine, we might feel like we're losing control, and that can still trigger tears. And for arousal, it is that sudden increase that matters. The intensity of crying depends on just how big that loss of control is and how much our arousal spikes. So, a bigger upset might lead to more intense crying. But here is a crucial part: not everyone cries in every situation. There is a crying threshold. This threshold is influenced by lots of things about us: our personality, our past experiences, even our gender. It's also influenced by the situation and our culture. For instance, some people are naturally more empathetic, meaning they feel with others more strongly. That empathy can actually lower your crying threshold. Also, how we feel about crying matters. If you see crying as a sign of weakness, you might hold back your tears. If you see it as a normal, healthy expression, you might be more likely to cry. And age plays a role too. Babies cry a lot to get attention. But as we grow up, we develop other ways to manage our emotions and might cry less often, especially for negative reasons. But interestingly, older adults sometimes cry more from positive experiences. The presence of other people is also a big factor. We might be more likely to cry when someone we trust is around, someone who can offer support. Crying in front of strangers might feel too risky or embarrassing, especially for adults who might worry about appearing vulnerable. So, the CAS model says crying has two main functions. First and foremost, it signals that loss of control to others. This is the social signaling part. It's designed to get attention and help. The second function is more about ourselves. Crying can help us regulate our arousal and mood. It can help us calm down. But the researchers emphasize that this self-regulation part often works better when we get social support. So, it's a bit of a team effort. When does crying stop? The model calls this crying offset. It happens when arousal and negative feelings go down, and our sense of control comes back up. It's not instant though. Our bodies need time to fully calm down. After crying, we enter a post-crying phase. This is like the normal ups and downs of your day, but there might be a lingering effect where you're a bit more prone to crying for a while because you've just gone through something intense. Let's look at a few scenarios to see how this model plays out. Imagine someone gets some really sad news. Their arousal goes up, they feel a loss of control, and it passes their crying threshold. They cry, and if it leads to getting support, maybe a hug from a friend, their arousal goes down, control comes back, and they feel better. That's successful regulation. But what if they cry and the bad feelings and high arousal just don't go away? Maybe the situation keeps bothering them, or they don't get the support they need. Then the crying isn't effective and they stay upset. Now, think about a really joyful moment, like seeing a loved one achieve a big dream. Your arousal might spike and you might feel a loss of control, not in a bad way, but in an overwhelming, amazed way, because it's a positive situation and maybe we have more coping power. The loss of control might be less intense and our crying threshold might be lower. This can lead to tears of joy, which are often shorter and less intense than tears of sadness. The model also predicts that someone who generally feels more in control might need a bigger upset to start crying, and they might be able to regulate their emotions better without tears. This model generates a lot of testable ideas. For example, it predicts that the combination of increased arousal and loss of control is what triggers crying. Future research could really dig into measuring both of these things at the same time. Using things like heart monitors and asking people how they feel their control is during emotional moments. It also suggests that the intensity and length of crying would depend on how strong that arousal spike and loss of control are. So, a bigger emotional hit might mean a longer cry. And what about that crying threshold? The model says it's not fixed. It can change based on our experiences, our beliefs about crying, and even who is around us. Imagine someone having a really bad day, feeling generally low on control. For them, a smaller event might push them over their crying threshold compared to someone who's feeling on top of the world. Now, no model is perfect, and the researchers are upfront about the limitations. One big challenge in crying research is that it's hard to get everyone to cry in a lab setting. So studies often have to rely on people remembering when they cried, or they use situations that aren't quite the same as real life. Also, they acknowledge that their model, while aiming to be comprehensive, might simplify things. Real emotions are messy. They also note that while the signaling function of crying is pretty well supported, the idea of crying as a primary self-soothing tool is less clear-cut. There is still more research needed to fully understand how crying might help us regulate our own emotions internally. So, what does this mean for us? The KS model gives us a much richer understanding of why we cry. It's not just a random emotional outburst, it's a complex signal, often driven by that feeling of losing control combined with a bodily reaction, and it's deeply social, meant to connect us and get us help. It reminds us that feeling vulnerable and even shedding tears can be a powerful way to communicate and to seek comfort, whether from others or even from ourselves. It's fascinating how this research highlights that crying isn't just about sadness. It can happen when we're overwhelmed with joy or amazement too. It's a universal human experience that's probably more complex and functional than we often give it credit for. What do you think? Does this model resonate with your own experiences with crying? Let us know in the comments below if you found this breakdown helpful. Please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the amazing world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.